What the Heck's your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 old friends fondly returning to the board and the game. We are coming to you today. I'm your co-host, Davey, and with me I have a pretty full house. I've got Josh. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, Davey.
Brian, how are you?
What's up? Doing well.
Skylar.
Excited for another reason for new players to get into this game.
Excellent. And one more, a guest, but one known to listeners of this network. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great, and hopefully since episode 19, I'll have something important to say, or like I've done something since I appeared on the last episode.
Just a hot second ago, I did not do the groundwork to look up when the last time you were on. I think you were on for a rules of thumb sort of thing, something like that.
That was episode 19, August of 2019. So it's been about 4 years.
Yep. Hardly a thing has happened in those 4 years. So, we are coming to you. We're actually recording on the 28th of May. So this is one of the biggest lead times we've done in a long time, but it's because this starter set is in our hands and we wanted to kind of demonstrate how it is for bringing it to a returning player or somebody who just basically hasn't played in a long time. So somebody who is familiar, and that person is Eric. Eric,
that's me.
We'll talk to you a little bit more about your background with the game, just so we've got a baseline. As always, we'd say thanks to GW for a review copy of this, so that we were able to kind of create this content, get that laid out for you. That's made possible by that. Also made possible by all the people listening, passing it on, and our generous patrons. You should be getting this on the 17th of June. And so if there is like some seismic thing that has happened in Underworlds in the interim and we're not referencing it, well, now you know why. It's because we just don't care. No. But that's that. We're going to do some quick community shout outs, our usual pieces, and we'll kind of launch into the episode itself. Who's got something they want to shout out here?
I've got a unrelated shout out, but the Independent Characters podcast is returning from their second hiatus. Just glad to see them back. They're a narrative Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar, but primarily 40k podcast. A lot of dads, a lot of dad energy. Just glad to see them back in the show.
Yeah. I'm glad Aaron does not listen to this. Otherwise, he would set his secret police on you for referencing 40k content on this network. But that's you're safe, I think. No, but really, that's Eric. You're familiar with these guys, right? It's a narrative bent.
Yeah. It's been nice, kind of getting into some 40k like throughout the years, having a 40k narrative podcast to listen to, just to get a little bit of buzz off of it without having to invest in the whole system.
Just dip your toe in. Yeah. We have locally started up our league, had their first week this past week. We had a cool showing there. So thanks to Noble Knight Games for giving us space to do that in. We had 10 folks out, and I got to return to some old favorites. Got some got some worm spat out. Plenty of weird puns thrown around, and then a little Grimwatch, pure rivals for Vince, who was back out for the first time in a long time. That's pretty awesome.
What's your plan for the worm spat there, Davey?
Just a little tinkering. I feel like there's some control builds possible, and that always gets my interest.
I'm just saying, if you did a Toxic Terrors build with them, they would be the weird spat.
That's true. Yep. That'd be pretty thematic. I do have some Toxic in there because that's not a plot locked deck. So when you're building for Championship, the much of the world is your oyster for card selection. And then Skylar, I think we're contractually obligated to have you plug our upcoming event.
Absolutely. August 13th, which is a Sunday, we are hosting the Madtown Throwdown for quarter 3. And that is going to be a championship best of 3 event. And we have a page already built up for it. You can go visit our page, see our breakdown of the event there. We have some prize support that is only hinted at on the page so far. And there will be a reveal on that as we get closer to the event.
Sweet. We would normally do our What the Hex is going on with you, but it's been League and it's been the subject of this episode. So we're going to forego that unless somebody has something burning a hole in their pocket. Actually, this is a good time, Eric. Everybody knows about the Underworlds we've been doing. You are involved with Dogs of Warcry podcast. Why don't you give us a little glimpse at what Dogs of Warcry has been doing?
Yeah. The Dogs of Warcry is a Age of Sigmar Warcry podcast. Warcry is a cinematic skirmish game. Similar in size, maybe a little bit bigger. You can play warbands between 6 and 12. So a little bit different than Underworlds. But we cover a lot of narrative. We cover a lot of kind of the new lore as it comes out. And this year's been a really good year for Warcry. We've had 4 big boxes in the Gnarlwood, same setting that you guys are in.
Yeah.
Been a lot of fun seeing how far we're going in this season and kind of hopes for what's coming next. So we've also got a starting box coming out this summer. So we're going to be in the same boat, kind of a new entry point to get new players in. And so, yeah, looking forward to it.
Cool. I think I had missed that. It's a starter set, like unlike these kind of GUR boxes that have been coming out.
So it's going to be so the GUR boxes have been sort of 2 full war bands, bespoke, brand new, never seen before, with kind of a table's worth of tall terrain, lots of platforms and that sort of stuff. This next starter is actually going to have, and I apologize because I don't know the names well, Xandire's. So it's going to feature 2 Underworld warbands as Warcry warbands.
Oh.
So Xandire's Truth Seekers and the Curse or the Vampires.
Okay.
Curse Bloods? No.
Crimson Court, probably.
Crimson Court. And it'll come with kind of a paper board and some terrain that's reminiscent of the Mausoleum set. So like fences, wrought iron fences and that sort of thing. So lighter on the terrain, but sort of a lower price point of entry. And so, yeah, looking forward to seeing how they approach that, because this is a little bit new for us. We've had Underworlds, all the Underworlds warbands are playable in Warcry. They've got rules for it, and it's really fun to use them as unique characters or conversions. But this is our first time kind of getting them as an intentional release, I think, for Warcry.
Okay, well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into the starter set here. Our starter set, which is out. We kind of put the word out here for who among the network might want to try it out. Either some of our players, so Paven was disqualified from being on this because he actually plays a fair amount. We're looking for people who had never played before or hadn't played in a very long time. And Eric, you raised your hand.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us a little background on how familiar you are with Underworlds? How much would you say you've played? And coming in, how comfortable were you with being able to run a game outside of this?
So I think, probably talked about before, Davey, you and I were grabbing the initial box, the Shadespire box when it came out, and playing games of that. I think our first game of that was at Holy Havoc, maybe playing doubles, and maybe that story's been told a bit. And so I played a lot of Sepulchral Guard, which made part of the reason I raised my hand to jump in this one, because I've been listening to you guys, and there's always we can talk about kind of why I'm on the outside looking in. But when the Rivals decks and these kind of ready to go decks that are also like, I guess, stand up to other decks, they're viable. It's not a lot of deck building aspect to it, lets you jump in quick. And to have that kind of come out for the Sepulchral Guard was really interesting to me. So I raised my hand for that. Last time, so like I said, it was 2019 was when I was kind of still like that rule of thumb was still a little bit of a teaching me, because I was out of it a little bit then. I popped back in a little bit when Thundrix Privateers came out and played them a little bit in League when it was at the Warhammer store, and played for maybe a season. Unfortunately, Warcry came out right after that, I think. So I think that came out in 2019 as well, which sort of swept me over for a while, and creating a new podcast and all that kind of stuff. So but yeah, so and it was great. Skylar and I, when looking at the game, he gave me a little bit of a refresher, and we did a little bit of a history or try to figure out, okay, when did that change? When did that change? And so there's also some really cool mechanical changes to the game that I really like. And we can get into those as we bump into them.
So rolling up on the day, if you didn't know that you were going to be playing in the starter set, would you have felt comfortable? Like, what are you familiar with how that there's like, I always want to say Relic, but that's not it. Rivals Nemesis Championship. Are you familiar with the distinction on that, or is that kind of hazy?
Well, as an educated listener to What the Hex, I do keep up a little bit on what's going on and that, kind of what those differences are. So one of the sticking points for me in the past has been the kind of the wide array of the deck building has been intimidating for me. I guess I'll put it that way. And I'm not a collector of everything. And so that was one reason that I kind of stuck away. But in terms of the things that I felt confident in were, the rounds of play. I'm dealing with power cards and glory cards. I was kind of familiar with the turn sequence and how the flow of the game is, but I knew that some of that would change because some of that's gotten, from listening to you guys, some of that's gotten more ironed out, and what the order of things, which again can be intimidating, but
sure.
once you go through it a couple of times, it feels very good to have that ironed out. And so, I feel like the game probably hadn't changed so much that I wouldn't know what kind of game I'm playing, or when it would still feel like Shades or feel like Underworlds.
You can call it Shadespire. one of our favorite guys ever, Stephen Van, had a blog called Call It Shadespire. So,
I mean, one of the coolest settings ever of AOS. And I knew that these guys were going to be go easy on me and walk me through, so I wasn't too worried about it. I'm an adventurous type, so I was ready to kind of make mistakes and that sort of thing. But I'll say it felt, once we got into the game, I felt like, and I think Skylar, you may have commented on it too, of like it felt very familiar once I got into it. It didn't feel like a completely different game or anything like that, and that felt really good.
Yeah, I think I said at the time that watching you play was akin to maybe you found that old pair of slippers that you loved that got stored away in a closet. You forgot about them, slipped right back into them. Oh yeah, nice and cozy.
It's cozy.
I can only assume there were lots of like there's the goofy Prince of Dust voice. Did that come out?
It should have.
I'm sorry, he has a voice. Please share immediately.
The Prince of Dust didn't play a pivotal role, and so there was no point in which he needed to announce himself.
Okay, right.
So it's a narrative thing. You really you didn't earn it, I guess. I'll say that.
The Prince of Dust didn't earn it.
What did come to the table was an amazing conversion and paint job on this warband that is going to need to get pictured because it was fantastic. The Warden especially was a highlight of mine. Brian, I'll let you talk about the Prince of Dust here. The Warden, he had affixed this, what would you call a burning... A brazier, thank you. This brazier crown on him. And with red being the primary color throughout all of the models, then having this bright blue brazier, like looking like anime hair coming off the Warden, it looked fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a Hex Wraith head swap. So one of the champions of the Hex Wraiths, which are spectral horse riders for the Night Haunt and AOS, which I think are still around, maybe not.
They are.
Yeah, I have to convert some things, but yeah, thank you.
Skylar, you before we dive into the set itself and your guys' experience, you're someone who's taught this game a lot, as much as any of us, if not more. From your perspective, as someone who's teaching the game, what do you find to be like the challenges, if not unique, then maybe particular to Underworlds or notable with teaching Underworlds to a new player? And here you can reference a returning player or somebody who's new to the game altogether. And we'll use that as a framework to kind of talk about how that starter set helps or does not help that situation.
Yeah, great question, because there are two things that spring straight to mind that this playthrough guide actually addresses. So the first thing is variability. Actually, it's both things. It's just in two different forms. One is variability in your cards, and then the other is variability in dice. So card players have a little bit of like forgiveness towards this concept, but it doesn't necessarily, even with that forgiveness, generate a good first play experience if instead of learning and interacting with the game on your first time with it, you're just getting, the bottom side of probability and variability throughout the course of the game. So in Underworlds, that can look like a handful of upgrades, even after a mulligan. That can look like, that third end phase card snuck into your hand right out of the gate, or a handful of end phases and you have no surge targets during your round. Or every time the experienced player at the table rolls their dice, they get a crit somehow. I don't know why. I'm confident it's a universal rule of the game is if there's a newer returning player at the table across from an experienced player, the experienced player is going to get the dice luck. I don't know why.
I did welcome Vint back to League by rolling 3 consecutive single crit defense on like the Butcher or something, to the extent that I was like calling my shots later. I'm like, what are you even doing attacking this guy, Vint? He's going to roll a crit, and then he'd roll a crit. Like, oh my God, I'm sorry, man.
Hey, Brian, would you like to share with the class?
Yeah, it's your fault.
Go on.
I mean, you have a way worse track record than I do.
Yeah, but mine wasn't today.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that later.
There were a few crits on the side of the Stormcast today, but that's neither here nor there this time.
Okay. I would say they were less problematic in this scenario, and I think part of that is the returning player was playing a warband in abundance, a warband that doesn't mind taking hits like that.
Yep.
So if I were sitting somebody down to play this game for the first time, I think I might actually lean them towards playing the Sepulchral Guard, simply because death isn't the end for a unit. In fact, it might be part of your game plan. So it hurts a little less when those crits sneak through, and they're going to, from a probability standpoint, be more present across the table because they're throwing 3 swords a lot.
And I might say too, if I can, for anybody who's a Warcry player listening, having 7 models is familiar to a Warcry player, and having some of them be disposable, we call them, chaff. I think you guys call them dangle bros sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, it's okay for them to get taken out. It can be part of the strategy, and it's better for some of those to get taken out than other things, So I think Sepulchral Guard is a pretty good one in that regard of like letting go of some of those thoughts of, whether losing a guy is important or not, maybe not as relevant for your first game if you're playing Sepulchral Guard. And figuring out with later warbands when loss is okay and when loss is, too much.
And I'm actually going to double down on that recommendation. If you're an experienced player sitting down with this starter set, teaching somebody else, and they aren't expressly interested in playing Far Striders, because I'm always an advocate for let them play the one they're the most excited about. But if they could go either way, encourage them to try Sepulchral Guard because of what we just described. And then if there's 2 people being introduced to the game via the starter set, walk through the playthrough, because the playthrough will do the work of balancing that experience out for you. And go ahead.
Well, this is a good time to mention that. So that playthrough booklet, can you explain exactly what's going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what it does is, without any prep work, you don't need to sit down and study. You and another person who's never played this game before can sit down, crack open this book. It is a long book. And by that, I mean, so we've got 54 pages of content. That's not a daunting amount of content in the sense that, like, you don't need to read it going into this. It's not 54 pages that need to be studied. It's 54 well thought out pages to guide you through it. And the reason I bring up the page count is simply to show you how much effort they put into describing this experience and the thoughtfulness of guiding you through it. You don't need to know a single thing. It will introduce you to every concept. You know, it doesn't need to introduce you to attacking until it has the first, attack happen in the playthrough. So it'll set up the boards for you, set up the objectives, draw your initial hands to make sure that these are the hands that you have to look at. And as you're playing through, these cards will be played from your hand. These cards will be scored from your hand per this script that will walk you through.
So it's kind of like, I mean, you can almost think of it as a sort of scripted battle report that you play along, that you can move your own pieces along in synchronicity with it happening.
That's a very
or they just gave you a picture and text battle report to read through when you open the book, and you're like, whether you can find a battle report online that's a video report or not that's good at teaching new players, they just gave you one so that you have something guaranteed to teach you.
I think I may have said this on the cast before, but I think that's pretty savvy. I remember one of the things I was most voracious for right when I was learning. I mean, I'm thinking all the way back to when it was 4 warbands in the game. I would consume any battle report I could find, just because I wanted to see more reps. I wanted to see stuff play through, and to have one like in the box with it is a pretty slick move.
Yeah, a pictured and written out battle report is a great way to describe this. But I wouldn't stop there. I'd emphasize that throughout the battle report, they make sure to teach you every concept and to make sure that, there aren't scenarios where cards don't see play, because they're going to guide you through everything they want you to see, and they want you to think about how it could have gone differently.
Sure. Eric, as someone who has played a bunch of different games in the AOS Games Workshop universe, I know you guys didn't use this booklet. Is this a concept? Does it feel like a concept that is kind of uniquely positioned to be useful for Underworlds? I have a hard time picturing this being a thing that you could include in a Warcry box, or do you think that would work, like in whatever this Warcry starter is that's coming?
Yeah, so certainly different in the most recent kind of sets where they'd have 2 warbands and some terrain. They would have some sample, like they'd have what they'd call a campaign arc, and so it's like play this set of battle plans first, your victory condition and your twist and all that kind of stuff. And so they give you some guides so that you have something to jump into. You're not wondering what to do. It doesn't have the same walkthrough, hey, play this, play that, which I think could be helpful. Whenever I also do a lot of demos, I love doing demos, and there's a couple of victory conditions that I prefer when doing demos that also sort of take, just attacking like as the most important thing off the table, like it blurs a little bit. The one I'd like to play is called High Ground, and it's you score when you get your models on higher platforms. And so it gives you a chance to do movement. It gives you a chance to just play all the pieces of the game and think through them. And I'm often giving them spaces to use their abilities throughout it. And so I think that's really important. Is it like it walks you through all the mechanics and lets you see all the different things that the warband can do, highlights it. I have to do that manually when I do demos for Warcry. It would be cool to have sort of a walkthrough of, we do warband building instead of deck building. And so they give you sort of, here's your warband with those bespoke starter boxes. So there's a few things that they sort of feed you, but walking through the use of the abilities would be missing, like what the steps and all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool.
Sure. I'm going to pitch this one to Josh and Brian as folks who've kind of read the cards and watched a playthrough. The selection of these two war bands, the Sepulchral Guard and the Forest Riders. How do you feel about that from balance and complexity and representation of sort of archetypes in the game? We'll start with Josh, maybe. Do you feel like they got it right, or do you feel like there's something that could be tweaked on it, or what's your thoughts?
Let me just clarify and make sure I understand the question. You're asking how do we feel about the matchup out of the box?
Yeah. How do you feel about GW having selected these two factions? So these factions individually and or as a matchup.
So I, having played Sepulchral Guard in the past and just at times how oppressive they can be with hold, I was a little hesitant. I did not think Forest Riders were going to perform admirably as a good matchup. That being said, once we got into recognizing that, hey, these are two refreshed war bands, I think it's a great matchup. It's definitely better than, Gnarl Spirit Pack versus Sons of Elmorn by a long shot.
If we're setting the bar low, yeah.
I know, low bar. Yeah. But I think these are two war bands. First and foremost, we've been talking about that scripted experience. I think that scripted experience is very well tuned. They have its spoilers, don't listen for the next 10 seconds. They have it with the Stormcast coming out on top, but Skylar can speak a little bit to this. It's by one glory, and they encourage you to look back at, hey, what if the dice had rolled different? What if, Sepulchral Guard had made this one tweak in their strategy, and kind of gives that backwards thinking of, okay, how could I have improved that gameplay rather than what the experience used to be, which was, wow, all of this sucks. Maybe I should do something about it, I guess, maybe.
So Brian, I'm going to ambush you a little bit with a more complicated question. When we're giving if let's say you were moderating a game between two people who are kind of learning it, it's often a good idea to give them hey, here's generally what you want to do. Here's there's going to be a lot of information coming at you with cards. You don't, experienced players, they know what objectives they're going to draw into, so they can start working towards things that they don't even have in their hand yet. What's the kind of 2 or 3 sentence pep talk you give for each warband to somebody's, to the Sepulchral Guard player to say, here's what you want to try to do, and then do that same thing for the Forest Riders?
Yeah, for Sepulchral Guard, it's you want to hold objectives, score points reliably. Don't worry about losing fighters. They're expendable and you can get them back. And for Forest Riders, it's you have to outpace that reliable scoring with aggro.
Fair enough.
As far as how the two pair, initially when the box was announced, I was I don't know if Forest Riders, while they're not a top contender warband, I was I don't know if they're a warband that would have thought needed to be fixed for the overall meta of the game or balance. I think there was other warbands that could have used a rewrite more. So I was a little okay, why are Forest Riders here? But then after playing, I was these are actually pretty well balanced. Even in the scenario in the book, they're pretty well matched. But then as we played it out, it was pretty well matched. I thought they added a lot to both warbands to make them feel they didn't feel like season 1 clunk in the new what are we, season 6. So yeah, it was a good pairing, real good matchup.
Yeah, I think you get to showcase a horde that holds, you get to showcase an elite that wants to fight, and you get to see just how useful having range 3 or higher attacks can be in certain situations. So,
absolutely, and with a low warband model count on the Forest Rider side, that range 3 gives them the utility to mess with the Sepulchral Guard's game plan. Gives them the reach.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the things that may have shined about this matchup is it gave you the ability to interact with all the different rules. I mean, we had knockback in, some of the Sepulchral Guard have knockback and cleave and scythe, and, Grievous was in there, and like all of the different pieces are represented in these two warbands, range and whatever the revive or bring back to, mechanic. So you sort of get with these two, you get introduced to a lot of different things that I think you'll see in other warbands as you explore beyond it. So it's kind of cool to have concrete examples, to be able to experience in your first couple of games.
Sure.
And to jump into your first couple of games, the way this rulebook or the playthrough is laid out, first off, you open up your starter set and it has in bold on the front, read this first. And so you'll read through it and, right away it sets you into playing the game, into getting a pre-staged board set up and all the way through your 3 rounds. So as soon as you hit the end of your 3 rounds, it asks you the question, what next? And it encourages you to play through the game once more. That's step 1. They have 4 steps here. So step 1, play through this exact game, walk through, page 1, all the way to this is page 50, right? Step back through it. Now that you know, then hopefully, it'll kind of really lock in these concepts for you. Then set this game up, then play it yourself. And that's actually what we did today. Okay. And we'll kind of jump to that in a moment. Step 3, play a full game of Warhammer Underworlds yourself. So, step 1, just run through it again. Step 2, run through the setup, and then it's all you. It's all player agency from there. Step 3.
So like it has a set deploy here with the objectives in this location, that sort of thing, or?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And then, step 3, now setup's on you as well. And step 4, the adventure continues. And it kind of speaks to deck building, organized play, warband expansions, and even then gives you a primer in the last couple of pages on each of the warbands. So, after you get to this page and you read what next, you might even, immediately flip. Oh, what's in these last couple of pages? Well, these are going to help you when you get to that player agency of game plan. They'll actually break down what some of your key strengths are, and how to get at things like getting inspired with the Far Striders, and then what your game plan is for each of these warbands.
Cool. And then step 5, win a grand clash.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think
draw the rest of the owl.
I think the rest of this box is actually still meant to kind of be the general release. Go into all stores, Walmart's, Barnes and Noble, and all that.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So I think, yeah, and because they will put some starter kits or the little intro, just a little board game that's not part of any of the larger properties like Underworlds or Dogs Warcry or anything, but they come up with all these little board games to just sprinkle into Barnes and Noble stuff just to get people introduced to the property. It's almost like something like Chaos in the Old World to an extent. But some of these games actually have miniatures that translate into Underworlds or Dogs Warcry or Warcry or et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where I think that playthrough book shines, because somebody never hearing anything else about Underworld sees a 1v1. Maybe they want to step up from Unmatched, and they see a 1v1 duel game like Unmatched that they want to take to another level of complexity, and they have this book right there. They don't need any outside source telling them how to play the game. It's right there in the box.
Yeah, it makes sense. The box itself says 2-player starter set. It kind of tells you what it is.
What an interesting comparison too. Those familiar with Unmatched, I actually really like that comparison, because it is you grab, essentially your warband, usually like a fighter and their allies and their pre-made deck, and you essentially play a Rivals game when you play Unmatched. And that's what this game could be for you. If you didn't want to do any deck building, you just wanted to play Rivals, you could play Underworlds Unmatched. essentially.
All right. Well, we talked about it. Tell me a little bit about your game, and I'll have some follow-up questions about that experience. But give us the broad strokes of how the game itself went.
Yeah, I want to jump in here real quick and just kind of give a framework as to how we ran it. And then I want to, hand the mic over to Eric. Absolutely. I would much rather hear how he, the returning player experience was than sitting here and yammering on myself. Okay. So I just wanted to, again, set that framework. So initially we did the setup. So we placed out the boards. We actually made a modification. So the boards that come in the starter set, there are 2 facings from the last starter set and 2 facings not from the last starter set. And that got us excited. So we put out the ones that we hadn't seen and used those. The ones actually in the rulebook are the ones that were in the previous starter set.
Got it.
Right. And that's going to be your walkthrough. But we just modified the placements a little bit. Essentially, we made sure that there were 2 Far Striders within shot of 1 already placed petitioner. Actually, I think it was the Prince of Dust that was within. Regardless, that 2 Far Striders started within 3 of 1 sepulchral placement, and that the warden was in the back. Because essentially, that's kind of what they're kind of getting at here, right? Is they don't want a first-time player to accidentally put the warden up front and have their game plan shattered. They also, right? And they also want to make sure that, the Far Striders have some options if they end up going first right out of the gate, or if they don't go first, the Sepulchral Guard player could recognize, I should back this unit out. So we went with their board setup, just a little modified so that we could see those exciting new board facings. And then what I did throughout the course of the game was I gave them the starting hands that the guidebook recommended. And then anytime a surge would score, I would find in the rule book what objective card would be drawn next from that surge scoring according to the script.
Okay.
So their card draw throughout the course of the game was indeed scripted, start to finish. Like we'd, do end phase scoring, and I'd go fish out what their next hand was supposed to look like and get that over to them. The rest was player agency.
Okay.
And I really liked that experience. Again, because we ended up not going through the script beat by beat, I wanted to see how that objective and power hand flow looked like throughout the course of the game. That meant they were starting each with a surge and 2 end phase, each with 3 ploys and 2 upgrades. So, making sure they had interesting options, good goals, right out of the gate, and thoughtful goals and cards throughout the rest of the game to consider.
That makes sense. That's cool. Eric, we heading into this, you have kind of a scripted card draw. But then I always feel like when I've got somebody, and again, you're already fairly familiar with the game from previous, as we established in the before times. But does it? How much information overload did you feel like you had right out of the gate, or did it feel pretty manageable?
We did. Skylar did a good job, and we took the time to kind of just talk through what was old and what was new. And I was happy to hear some of the new stuff, things like that a mulligan, if you got your first hand drawn, that if you're getting some, third round objectives, that you're not just burning those out of your deck, that they can be shuffled back in. Like it's a very kind, gracious sort of way. And there's a few other things where it felt like instead of like punishing dead ends, another one was if you've got a ploy or a upgrade card that goes to a specific fighter, and that fighter's has been taken out of action, there's a mechanic to be able to replace that with a different power card. So it gives you outs if your strategy you went into hits a dead end. It doesn't. It means you can kind of try and draw back into a different strategy or a different side of your objective. So that was really cool. So overall, we took time to look through or talk through what was new, what had changed, and I felt like maybe about 70% of it was the same, all the feel, but there was enough changes, and I think some for the better, or most of them. I don't think there was anything that I thought was like worse or I didn't like it as much. So like going into it, we just took the time to explain it and level set and say, all right, here you go. What we didn't do, and neither Brian or I like sat and looked through our deck ahead of time. So neither of us knew what the objective, like the overall like objectives were, what was the potential to draw. And so that was also kind of nice to have Skylar sort of like prepping those for us, because, you knew that it was supposed to be sort of like not necessarily your best possible draws. I'm sure there's other objectives or power cards that could be even more powerful or tip the scales one way or the other, but they were really, they were really good assortment.
And I've never played Far Striders. I don't usually touch Stormcast. So I have no idea what they're... All I knew was Invasion Aggro used to be their shtick. And I had no idea how that had changed.
As an aside, we were talking about that afterwards, they're ranged aggro with an invasion focus. And it was kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, if they were ranged hold, well, then they would just be, Sleek's Warband. Right, so
yeah, sure, yeah,
really sets them apart.
Storm of Celestis, for people who are not familiar with that alternate naming convention of them. I think I did make it clear at the outset that Skylar, you were facilitating. Brian was playing Far Striders, and Eric was the Sepulchral Guard. So
correct. Well, and on the sidelines, painting was our peanut gallery, Josh, and boy was he brutal.
I was only cunningly brutal in punishing myself with the paint job I was working on.
What paint job were you working on?
Oh God. So this we might need to move this to the what the hex are you up to? But so you're familiar with Mike, only plays orcs, Mike?
Yep.
So he handed me his crushes and a bottle of, hold on, let me get the name.
Interesting.
Zephyr Pink metallic paint.
Oh, wow.
So handed me those two things and was like, make them look real dumb. And for those of you listening at home that aren't familiar with some of my work, that's my brand.
Okay.
taking weird paint jobs and just making it like thematic and fun is really just speaks to my heart. So this is probably the most effort I've put into the gaudiest color scheme I have ever seen.
Yeah, his figurehead for his brand is a Lord of Change Big Bird meets Lovecraft.
Yeah. And the story behind that one is back when Brian was trying to con me into this hobby, he kind of took me on a tour of the Chaos Gods and their greater demons. And he was showing me, the Bloodthirster, the Keeper of Secrets, the Lord of Change. And we got to the Lord of Change and I was like, it'd be hilarious if somebody took all that plastic, all that effort, and painted it up like Big Bird. Tee-hee, ha-ha. Hilarious. Fast forward a few years, and we're in the same Secret Santa with another friend who knows this story. It gets me a Lord of Change and a bottle of yellow primer.
Oh, man.
And said,
nut up or shut up, basically. So yeah, that's why I'm definitely not in the background painting to scale soccer pitch markings on these bases because
Josh,
I have
why soccer
too many
pitch?
details. Because Mike is a very big fan of the Forward Madison soccer team, and that's part of why he gave me a pink metallic paint instead of
For
just any
reference
other
for
color.
listeners, Forward Madison's colors are blue and pink, so all of Mike's orcs are blue and pink.
And to even add more to the fluff, God, we're going way off the deep end here.
I thought it wasn't possible to get more off topic, but here we go.
No. To further go into it, the Forward Madison team's mascot is the flamingo, right? They refer to like certain one of their catchphrases is the full mingo, which is one of the orkiest phrases I've ever heard in relation to the flamingos. So it's
I
just
did not know that.
perfect. Yeah, no, it's there. So
Very well.
The lore writes itself.
All right. Well, we'll bring this back around to what was going on the board here.
Oh, right. That was the thing.
That was this episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Eric, what general strategy did you take? And tell me, give me the broad arc of the game here.
Yeah. So it was really interesting. I think there were some things that are very familiar to those who have played Sepulchral Guard, and that was, keep the warden alive because he does a lot of the work. Moves, has these abilities that both can give you extra movement, but also revive models that have been taken out of action. And so that's a protection, to hold on, somebody to hold on to and not get too aggressive with. But I will say, I feel like a couple of things. The deck feels very suited to these guys, and I think another benefit of the Rivals format or having faction decks is that it can feel you can get a sense of what the army is supposed to do. You can get a sense of what kind of the theme of it pretty quickly. And so I feel like that was there. Get on some objectives. Score by bringing some things back to life. They inspire by having things be revived. Sorry, I'm using the wrong term here. What's the term for them coming back, getting the token?
It is a rise token,
Rise.
But there's no keyword for resurrecting a fighter.
Sure. So you get inspired if they have rise tokens on them. So you want to, bring these models back. So it's sort of like it encourages you pretty quick to be like, okay, I know this stuff. I'm taking up all of the deployment hexes on my board. So some stuff's going to be up, ready to get hit. And it was trying to figure out, okay, how do I first use, I think the first turn I used movement, or the warden's movement 3 times. Maybe I used it all 4. But I just was trying to figure out how to get positioned to, set up some maybe attacks in the future, or get things on objectives when I needed them to, or get some things on objectives early because I had a kind of a surge objective one. It was after my opponent's action. It could, if I had 2 objectives totaling more than 6 points, so I had the 4 and the 3 for 7.
Right.
So I needed to do that early in order to kind of be able to score it on my opponents after their their action phase. So like things like that, it kind of like led you towards it. And so some of it was pretty clear the first round. And I remember very distinctly the second round going, okay, now it felt like it got more complex. So the first round felt fairly easy to be like, okay, if I just move some things around, I know that I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to rush in and like charge something, or even barge something. I don't know that I thought very much about barge and some of these other ones.
You and us all.
Yeah. So to that point of being overwhelmed, I kind of narrowed my focus down to what are my objectives? What does my kind of best card do the most? And it's move things around and put rise tokens on things that have been taken out of action and bring them back. And so how much of that can I do in this round to make that work? And so I sort of followed my bliss in that. Yeah. So the first round was fairly easy to be like, let me move some stuff around, get some things out of danger, initially, move some stuff onto objectives, and see what he was going to do. So I kind of played the waiting game first turn. But it was,
from my perspective on turn one, I was just trying to invade but not go full in. I was trying to skirt the edges, skirmish, and try and use the range 3 to shoot him off objectives, which I think led to him not making many or any attack actions because he was using those moves to get back onto objectives and just keep moving the swarm forward.
Now, Eric, that's a new thing since you've been gone, is that once somebody has moved, they can still move.
Yeah.
It's a universal, but it's also specific to that action. That probably felt pretty good.
Yeah, no, it was, and especially I think with these guys being able to, because movement is one of these guys' the Sepulchral Guard's big, draws. It was nice to not have things stuck. But yeah, it and I don't think I noticed it, but now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, nothing felt stuck, especially because I wasn't charging anything.
Yeah.
I kept my flexibility.
Yeah. I think that felt like a positive change that we as veteran players, we not glossed over it, but we thought of it more in our terms, but less in the terms of new players, and not having that negative player experience of like, I made this move early, and it's still something you don't want to do at the wrong time, and then lock yourself out of a charge or whatever, or be less efficient. But at least it gives you still have options afterwards, instead of being like, well, I guess I can't do anything for the rest of the game.
Right. And season 1 was a different age, so like there was a different speed entirely. But it was definitely something where, like, Sepulchral Guard back then, if you make a move, they only move 2. So if you got onto an objective, it might have been the only guy that could have reached that objective. So getting knocked off of it, you're like, well, there that goes. But now that you can move, there you go.
Yeah. So made those moves round 2, round 3, progress on.
Yeah. First turn. And at the end of first turn, I think I was surrounded. I had one of the Stormcast and Elias was in my backfield, back of the board. I had, one Stormcast to the right of me, Stormcast to the left of me. Here I am stuck in the middle with you. It was, but it was cool. It was thematic. They kind of lightning struck in and had me surrounded. And so I was kind of trying to figure out, okay, so turn 2, turn 3 was a little bit of, is my warden going to get picked off? How do I?
This was such an excellent moment, observing you returning to the game, feeling this out, for when he's saying turn 2, he's referencing round 2, round 3. And at the start of round 2, he wins the roll off, because again, we're doing player agency on all rolls and, all decisions outside of this guided, card draw experience. And so he wins the roll off for round 2, and he's like, is it better to go first or second here? And it was such a good question.
Yeah.
There was no clear answer here, because he's playing this hold warband who might want final say, towards his objective hand. So that kind of skews you towards going, second. But that also means that they're going to get, some initial attacks out, and his warden is within, attack range already of a Far Strider present. So do you let the, shots start coming in on the warden? Can anybody really go down? And we talked about how, when you're playing Underworlds going into a round, if you go first or make another player go first, you're not able to buff their turn with a power step preceding it. And it's like, so make your decision off of what Brian has at face value right now, because he's not going to get a turn to buff it. And he's not that's going to knock him down to 3 turns with power steps instead of 4.
Yep. And so I think I did end up giving you the turn, Brian, because I didn't know what I was going to do next. Like, I didn't know whether or not I needed to spend time saving somebody, getting my warden out of that position, or moving somebody. So I sort of wanted to use up one of your actions to do something. So even if it was take swipes at the warden and not, and he'd probably still survive, I think. Then I could decide, well, now he's definitely in trouble, and I could make a more decisive action.
How did that round 2 go? Did the warden survive through round 2?
So,
yes, the warden did. I did get fully committed, and the Far Striders dove in. By this point, I was now finally scoring some objective cards. It was pretty light scoring in the first round. I think just a couple objectives or a couple glory here and there. But then round 2 got really active with kills and respawns.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I was able to, in those couple rounds, or the second round, I think, put a lot more. I was able to score a few more things in reaction or as surges. And then I was able to upgrade the warden a couple of times, upgrade one of the. I was able to bring a couple of guys back to get them inspired, and I needed a certain number of inspired fighters in order to meet some other objectives. And so I ended up with a couple of more threatening pieces. The champion was up to damage 3 with an ability.
With cleave, yeah.
And so made him a little bit of a threat piece. Was able to win back some objectives that had gotten taken off of, or something to that effect. And so we fought over a couple of things there. He was trying to keep me off stuff, and I was trying to get back on stuff. And he was coming way over into my space, and I had one guy I was trying to sneak over into his space without him, raising alarms, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of, and yeah, at some point realized, and this was a key point. One of the things I admire, but is also kind of intimidating about Underworlds, is knowing what all the cards do, that there are so many different abilities and cards and things to think about. Because I had got a little bit coached here that he had Brian had discarded an objective that had to do with killing my leader, and which was a signal that maybe he wasn't going to try and kill my leader. That was not something he was going to spend time on. So I was able to kind of, because that was pointed out to me and we could talk through it, I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about the warden. I don't have to spend energy moving the warden or getting him out of harm's way, or even worrying about the warden striking back. I could focus on movement. I could focus on the objectives. I could focus on a few other things to get where I needed to go. And so those are clever things. It's kind of one of those cool things about Shadespar, but also a little intimidating or pressure to feel like you need to know and be aware of all the things that are being discarded.
I had that objective round 1, and he was in the backfield. And when I scored one of the other 2 and ditched, I ended up ditching that one because the other objectives weren't pushing me in that same direction. They wanted me to do other things, so I would have been trying to do 3 different things. Right. So I tried to be more efficient with scoring.
I mean, I'll still do that. I'll play, round 2 and round 3 in fear of a particular objective or gambit, only to realize that my opponent has discarded it sometime in the first round or something like that. Usually that's like late in a tournament or something like that. But like, oh man, it is a lot to keep track of. So were you guys pretty close after 2 rounds?
Oh, we were at 9s. So first round, I think we were 2 or 3, each. After round 2, I think we were both up to, we were up to 9, right? Or somewhere amidst 3, we had both gotten into the 9 range.
Yeah, round 2 was high scoring, and then we both got up to 9.
Here's how I know that these warbands have been revamped, because back in Shadespire days, like there was a time where if you got into double digits on scoring, it was pretty impressive. And those early times when there were just 4 warbands out. So.
Yeah.
All right. So round 3, still, sounds like everything's in the balance.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I had just a couple of things actually only one objective that I thought was gonna be viable, and we were both at 9. And I was like,
killed one Far Strider.
I had killed one.
I think there was one petitioner dead because he had respawned everybody else.
Yeah. And I had one objective, and that was to be on 3 objectives, 1 in his territory. And I managed. I made it. I don't know, an error. It was one of those talking points of should I have done that or could I have done this? And I ended up had a petitioner that had upgrades to make it, not be. You couldn't. What is the setback or
drive back?
So you couldn't drive it back. And I put him on an objective in my territory near his stuff. And I wasn't really. I could have moved him into the other territory and done that. But I think because he was in my territory, he went after him, but he wasn't able to knock him off the objective. Had I moved him somewhere else.
Exactly. So I actually don't think this part was particularly a play mistake. It was an interesting, thing to point out, after the fact. This is actually some of the final activations around 3. Eric has the choice between 2 objectives where he's going to position this fighter. And like you said, this fighter has got an upgrade on him that says, I can't be driven back. And he's got 2 cards in his scoring hand, one that says hold 3 and one that says all your fighters with a minimum of 2, I think, are in enemy territory or no one's territory. But all of your surviving fighters meet that criteria. I had
infiltrating skeletons. For one objective.
And so, had he picked the objective in enemy territory, now he's got a shot at both cards in his hand.
Right.
However,
and I'll say the mistake is I didn't realize that I could have, I had the opportunity to score both. So I was blinded to I know I can do this one. I wasn't thinking. Yep.
Sure. But to your credit, had you taken the move into enemy territory, then that particular fighter might not end up being Brian's target in a moment here.
Yep.
And if that fighter isn't Brian's target, then the target of choice could be driven off the objective, and then you're not scoring that hold 3 card, and that hold 3 card was worth 3 points.
Yep. So I definitely was. And what was nice, and I feel like I've had a couple of rounds with, again, KO, like in that space where I was working with the Thundrix Privateers, where I'm responsible for building the deck with the tools that I have or the certain ones that I have purchased, and building a deck to the best of my ability, and sometimes getting stuck with things that didn't fit, or the deck having incentives that are competing with each other on accident. And this very much felt like objectives were working with me. Everything that I was doing seemed like there was some chance I could have gotten it or viability to it. It didn't feel like something was like way out there, like Annihilation or something like that. Right. So that felt good. It felt good that things were choices, and that, maybe something had passed, like, oh, I'm not in position to do that. I could have been in position had something gone different, but it never felt like any of the cards I was getting were impossible or unrelated to the game I was playing.
That's cool. That's a tip of the hat to the deck in general, but also, I don't know, Scott, how much you think is from that sort of curated card draw.
I think the curated card draw is my favorite part of this rulebook. But I do think that the matchup here is really balanced, really interesting. I think that, we gave them player agency, right? And you're going to find out here in a moment that it comes down to tiebreakers.
Oh,
no, right. We found out right now. You just found it out.
Perfect.
And you don't even have to wait, listeners.
So you talked about spoiler warnings. Taylor, come on.
I would also like to point out that the design philosophy behind the decks, I think, has changed since you played last. And as they've developed. And I want to talk a lot more about kind of like how the game has changed. And we were talking about the collector thing, and
I want to circle back on the collector thing real bad too,
and all of that. But yeah, the objective deck it used to feel like kind of a toolkit of where do you want to go with this deck into championship. Do you want to go into hold? Do you want to go into aggro? Do you want to go into something else? And so when you're playing,
it was not designed to work with itself internally,
right? So it was kind of like you had the deck in 3 parts, and you could kind of do different things. It was a starter set that you built off into champions.
Absolutely.
Now with Rivals, they have a more cohesive idea for this warband wants to do this, and you can take it further, you can pivot it, you can do a little bit of changes, but it's much more like this warband has a thing that they like to do. You can double down on that, or you can go your own way, but it's much more cohesive and doesn't feel disjointed or confusing.
Absolutely. When I used to teach this game, I used to teach or pitch this game, I used to talk about your warband's specific deck as exactly what you stated, their toolkit, and the different avenues that you could explore with them. I didn't talk about how it was this cohesive Rivals deck experience, which is where they've really pushed these decks. And I think it's great.
So what end state did these decks get us to here?
Well, I'll just say again from a kind of a deck perspective, or what was in my hand, I'd used every single one of my power cards. So I was out of power cards, right? Like maybe one of the first activations of the 3rd round, I was out. So used them, and they were helpful, and they all, worked great. And of the 3 objectives, there was 2 that I guess in hindsight I could have scored, but one of them I was focused on. And so in that regard, again, I felt like, I was using the tools, nothing felt wasted. I wasn't unable to do anything. And then, we went to the last, scoring. Brian, tried to pull one over on me and score a particular objective. And if I had, more models out than the round, then the number of models was higher than the round number.
So if the total number of enemy models out of action is greater than, and I thought it was just greater than or equal to.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one.
And since they're respawning, that's a really hard challenge to do, but I thought I had met it with 3.
So I had to correct him and say, hey, do you know how to read?
Right. And for the listeners out there, keeping stat sheets for each of us, I want Brian's catchphrase column to include read the card.
RTFC.
RTFC indeed.
I was scoring well throughout the round. I didn't end up killing the Warden, which in hindsight is just always the go-to thing you should do against Sepulchral Guard.
Yeah.
But I was scoring my hands really well. Like some of it was that I just had to make successful attacks. I did, make some of those attacks towards the Warden, some of which he whiffed, some of which he defended. But I was scoring my cards well, doing things.
We actually talked about that after you headed out, Eric. We talked about how Brian was playing towards his game plan here instead of playing denial of your game plan. Mm-hmm. And for those listening, that is the way to teach a game. Do not punish your opponent by already, going one layer deeper and punishing their game plan. Just play yours.
Yeah. We ended with those last ones scored even. So after denying him that false objective that he tried to play, we both ended up at 11 glory exact.
12 and 12.
Oh, 12. Sorry, 12 and 12. And then, we had to come down to tiebreakers. And because I'm an objective deck, I had 3 objectives, or it wasn't the number of objectives, but the total number on my objectives, number 4, number 2, number 1, or whatever it was.
I believe that was it. I think, you ended up with 7 over his 5.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep. So he had 1 objective, number 5, and I had 3 objectives totaling 7. So just on that, I took the minor victory, I guess, would be in some some states, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a head scratch all the way through, and nothing was an obvious. Nothing was obvious, but some things were. Like you said, I think I just played my objectives the best I could without having to worry as much about. I wonder what he's doing, and it worked out.
And for those wondering where the script lands you, it asks who won. Question mark, big ol' column header there, and we have 17 glory points for Farstriders, 16 glory points for Sepulchral Guard. Is how the script plays out, but they followed up immediately with a what if question mark header, and they let you know that the Farstriders were able to get a glory off of a kill, so a bounty in the last activation. Imagine if that attack had missed, and given the tiebreakers, then exactly what happened with Eric and Brian would have played out, and the Sepulchral Guard would have taken the scripted game here, which was interesting. It was something we talked about right afterwards. It's like, hey, actually, you guys skip straight ahead to the what if.
I think
I'm your guide to these vast new realities.
I was just gonna say, I think that is a sign of a good close game. And it happens in Warcry 2 where you're sitting back and going, okay, what if something had gone a little bit different? Or what if sometimes it's dice, sometimes it's just a choice to go left versus right. And when you can point back to kind of multiple places where things could have changed, that's pretty satisfying to know that, and it's nice to know that you can make some mistakes and still come out, in a positive space.
Eric, I'm elated to hearing you say words like fun, satisfying.
I mean, I'll say we're doing our next episode is going to be a building a league or building community episode. And number one on my list is invite people to your house, have cappuccino ready and donuts. So I don't know how I could have not had fun with the hospitality you showed me. So
step number 2, drugs, said cappuccinos and donuts.
Wait a minute.
Step 3, profit.
When I showed up and there was 3 members of What the Heck's waiting for me, I wasn't sure if I was getting hard recruited or not.
Anything's possible. So you make your way through sort of, we'll call it a training or a retraining game.
Yeah.
At the back end of it, were there any game concepts for Underworlds where you're like, I still, maybe that feels kind of hazy to me, or what stood out to you? And then I'll follow that up with Skylar. Was there some concept you thought it'd be good to be able to teach this the next time through or something? So.
I would say the things that are probably hazy to me are the ones that my warband didn't do as much. So I didn't charge as much. So I'm trying to remember, I know that, but I saw that the Farstriders charged, and all 3 of them would charge, and then they could make another action even though they had charged because everybody had charged. So there were some things like that. I guess I'm not so hazy on that one as I thought I was. I think that there's what I'm probably hazy on, or what I didn't get from this particular thing, is I don't know the full deck or what the other options are in it by going through the kind of pre-planning card draw. So I don't know what that full deck is, but I will say I nearly just pocketed the deck so that I could read through it and find out more of what it does and that sort of stuff. So it made me interested in playing it some more for sure. But I'm trying to think if there's anything that feels unknown. I think some of those worries of like I not knowing what my opponent's deck is, or feeling totally caught off guard by my own mistakes or not having the right cards in my deck.
Sure.
Like those just weren't there this game. And I remember those being kind of, I wouldn't say anxiety drivers or anything like that, but like kind of bitter moments in previous games.
In ages past, you'd get a card where you're like, every time you go to draw a card, you're like, come on, help me. And when you flip it over and it says, in the third end phase, you score 2 glory. It's like, that's not going to help. And it's like they have a lot of those cards that had some dead ends or like I said, those different builds for championship that felt disjointed. In an intro game, those could feel really punitive or just like really take wind out of your sails when you need something to really help curveball your opponent. And yeah, I thought the decks flowed a lot better.
Yeah. Skylar, from the outside perspective, what concept would you say, like after having done this, what concept would you say, like, hey, I think the next time through I would try to reinforce X or Y?
Well, I think there are two rules that are enjoyable and encouraging for those who find the game intimidating from a card play standpoint, and that would be the new Mulligan rule that we've all grown accustomed to since the release of Harrow Deep, and the new Salvage rule as of Weird Hollow here. Those don't come up, right, in the script. The script doesn't have you Mulligan. Of course it doesn't. And the Salvage rule, as far as I remember, does not come up in here. And those are, for a returning player, those were beats I really wanted to hit with Eric, and he was enthusiastic to hear them.
Yeah.
But as far as notes that I felt needed to be reinforced, I didn't see them. I thought the matchup just lended themselves naturally because, again, player agency. I'm kind of stepping through the walkthrough as they're playing, looking at what the game would have looked like if we sat here and did the scripted playthrough, and paying attention to actually what is occurring and then feeding that card draw. And I thought it just conducted itself well and represented itself well to what a game of Warhammer Underworlds can be, should be, and gives you a good view of it, from mechanics to like exciting moments.
Sure. Did you have a most exciting moment, either of the players in there?
Was it when I thought that I could attack everybody with Scythe, when I thought my my Harvester had 2-inch reach and I was going to get everybody?
Oh, whoa.
But
we've never seen
that. I was
that
like,
yet.
oh, wait, no, that's his movement, not his range.
To your credit,
I was excited. I was real excited.
And we talked about this in the moment. Some like models, when displaying their weapons, in that lovely miniature, give you the impression that they've got a little more reach than they really do.
Yeah. That's a reasonable guess to make. Range 2 scything attack when, gentlemen?
When? Please no.
Why am I on Mollog?
Why am I pre-nerfed?
I can't imagine the penalty, to bring that in.
So hot take. If it were on any other warband, I think it would be really cool if Spiteshroom's scything was range 2, just because it's a spore cloud and it only does 1 damage.
Yeah.
2 fury, 1 damage, range 2. Yeah, maybe make it so it can't be modified. Anyway,
Like I said, on literally any other warband, Mollog needs no help.
Something I will say that I think is spicy, both in this matchup and in this script, is that round 1 awards the Farstrider player. Hold on, let me make sure I get this card name correct. The Etheric Paths.
This is the one that's like the hidden paths, the teleport card.
Right. Yeah. So they give that to the players round 1, and then encourage you to set this game back up with that hand and try again. And it's like, oh wait, I've got this tool to really get at the Wardener.
Yeah.
It's spicy just being in the matchup. It's spicy that they gave it to you, in hand 1 if you follow this setup. And for those listening that are like, well, I'd kind of like to, go through a round, with a new player that's scripted, really get that guided teach just out of a round, and then kind of do the remaining rounds, with player agency to really, add a little more to that learning experience, not have that whole time be scripted. It's going to cover most of the basics during your round 1, and actually straight in the rule book, it asks you, are you ready? In round 2, would you like to take the reins and go from here? Here's your hands, And player agency from here on out, if you have any questions, consult the actual rulebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. As far as like next steps, one thing I thought you guys made a good point about was not playing to deny the beginner's game plan. But when you're ready to do that, or when you think you have a player to do that, what I often do when I've got somebody new and I think they're ready for that is I'll talk it out like, hey, I'm moving into your territory, not because it's something that I need to do, but I'm pretty sure there's a chance that you have, whatever siege breakers or something in your hand that is wanting me to, stay in my territory. So this is why I'm making that play. So that communicates like, hey, you can play this, thinking about what's in the other person's hand. And, I don't know for a fact whether they've got it or not, but just kind of introduces that's set of thinking when folks are ready for it.
Yeah. I like that. Another option is to play with open hands or to do both. And I never would dissuade open hands in a teaching game, especially like even if the new player is like, no, I kind of want to guard my hand. Personally, I just want to focus on my hand myself. Offer the ability to reveal your own hand and just have that be public knowledge. Feel out your audience. That could be an overload of information if you're then kind of, as Eric stated, I didn't know what his game plan was, so I just focused on mine. That's actually a healthy learning experience. And I think one they kind of opted into with this book is Eric focused on just his learning and just his game plan. Whereas if you open face your own hand, then that could overload the player you're playing with. So know your audience.
Well, here's what I might say too. If you're running a demo game and you're worried about winning, then you're building community wrong.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So, give as many advantages as the new player is interested in doing to explore it. Because at the end of the day, if they win because they saw your hand, like nobody's counting it. No one's keeping track.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if they've got a handle of it, they felt like it's less intimidating, or that again, or even just the environment with you is safe and playing games, win or lose, is going to be a good experience, then, there's no need to get be competitive in this demo game, right?
Absolutely. And to that point, if you want to head off the crits that you will inevitably roll in abundance
as the
against the new player, against the new player, just count them as basic successes. That's a trick that we use. We kind of set the stage originally, and we'll say, hey, you're learning. I can't roll crits. You can. I can't. So anytime we see a crit from me, it'll be a basic success.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, gauging for, who you're playing against. Bobby would say, don't take any of your crits away. I want the full,
right.
Don't pull any punches, lay it on me.
Shout out Bobby.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think that's a fairly good coverage. What I'd like to do is kind of round table it, have the floor open. We're gonna start with Josh here. Do you have any thoughts you want to share on this sort of reintroduction experience and the starter set in general?
Yeah, on the starter set in general, the biggest compliment that I can give this box is it seems like a fantastic matchup and has gone to great lengths to make sure that it is a positive new player experience. There have been so many core boxes where the new player experience out of the box would be so lopsided, especially in recent history. Gnarl Spirit Pack, looking at you. And this just flies in the face of that. This is such a great new player experience that I would feel really comfortable telling any new player, if I didn't have the capacity to teach them myself, go get this box. This box will 100% get you up to speed on how to get started with Warhammer Underworlds.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, a lot. I would be in the same boat if I was starting out, where I'd be worried about like how balanced are these war bands. As an experienced player, I tend to say like it matters less how balanced they are and more how much you know about the game. Like if you're having out of balance, matchup, the player with more experience is still got a good chance to kind of push forward and win. But if both players are starting at the same level, you don't want one to just be blowing the other out of the water or something like that. So yeah, that's a good call. Brian, you got anything that you want to share about the starter set or reintroduction experience?
I would like to go last because I want to talk about how the seasons have changed and how the game looks. If you get into Underworlds, how the seasons will develop, how the releases go.
Yep, we'll come back around to you then. Skylar.
All right. And to jump off of what Brian just said, I'd love to take a beat at that time to talk about the collection of Underworld, something that Eric's alluded to that was a turnoff for him, something that we've kind of alluded through during the episode that we're excited to talk about. So tabling that for now, I'm going to introduce something called the correction step. And there was we were talking about a moment where Eric had a chance to go for an objective in his territory or enemy territory, and I was trying to piece out what that card was from memory. I've since looked it up. So for those listening, it was the Eternal Legions. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more friendly fighters are each in no one's and or enemy territory. So that was the card that potentially could have come into play here at the end, but wasn't necessarily a play mistake. Like we talked about, kind of our own what ifs, right? The rule book gives you its own the script gives you its own what if, and that was kind of ours. Interesting. Had you chosen the objective in their territory versus this one, here's how the game could have finished because Far Striders had the final say in this activation. The other thing, if you're listening, sometimes we run off on topics with threads unchecked. And early on, so this is, again, part of the correction step here. Brian, would you tell us real quick about the Prince of Dust? It was something we alluded to as worth talking about, specifically Eric's alteration.
Oh, I was just loving he had replaced the mace with a scimitar, big curved blade, and a head change that had where did you get that bit where it's got a spiky helm and a beard almost?
I believe it's just the classic skeleton kit, the previous one, so prior to the new Undead Skeleton release, so OG.
It just put the whole warband into more of a Turkish feel almost.
Actually, no. Also, the Hexwraith kit that with the Black Knights. Is that Black Knights? Which is still the same kit.
The Horsemen?
The Horsemen, yep.
Yeah, no, it was just a great small little conversions, and that's another one of the things I love about Underworlds is you may not love or play each warband that they release, but being able to convert and modify them or paint and test things on different warbands is that's what I use all the other warbands that I don't get around to playing with, and it's a lot of fun to see what people do with them.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm glad we enjoyed them.
Definitely. Super enjoyed them, and we'll definitely post pics of that here with the episode. So that is my correction step. If anybody else has one, feel free to jump in. But before I pass on the correction step, I'll address the question Davey passed over to me. And he, was asking about any final thoughts on the starter set. First off, I can't echo what Josh stated enough that this is such a balanced and interesting matchup to represent the game with. I'm really excited to say that. I definitely, it flies in the face of the Gnarl Spirit versus Velmorn matchup that the Gnarl Wood Core set presented with us for sure. So for my Battlestar Galactica fans out there, so say we all. But as far as additions, additional thoughts to the starter set, one thing I will say that we haven't touched on is just a light touch on the rule book real quick here. Not the read this first walkthrough, but the rulebook itself, it kind of leaves some of the seasonal baggage behind. And that's kind of about all it does if you're comparing it to the Weird Hollow rulebook. I haven't had a full run through the rulebook. I kind of, so, I developed a strategy, if you will, where I'm going to run through a rulebook with a highlighter and really try to pick out the changes. Here, I didn't get the chance to quite do that, and it wouldn't have worked as well here because they focus on what's in the box and just what's in the box. And so what I mean by that is, when they're talking about inspiring, they don't talk about the start or end of round inspire conditions in the advanced inspiration rules. They don't have to. They don't have any rule book, or they don't have any war bands in this set that are going to have those inspire conditions. So they just leave that out. And I think that's fine. I think that's great, actually, because it focuses on what this box has. And the current rulebook, like the Weird Hollow rulebook, if you're compelled to play more and play, in the current season, that's free online. You can go get that. So it doesn't talk about beasts or wizards because there aren't any. It doesn't talk about hazard hexes because there aren't any. And, not including hazard hexes, I think is a great call, because that's another thing that you'd have to teach that adds to the mental load of getting into underworlds. And the lower that barrier to entry can be, the more people we can show, this great game that we love. Additionally, I saw, on my first pass through that there are a couple of FAQs that kind of get rolled in here. So we'll probably see those in future rule books. For example, I'll just call out one real quick. Rerolled. So let me back that up a little bit. If you're throwing your first roll off into round one, there's always been that question of, if we end up matching results, does that first person to get their models on the board, do they get the crit in the roll-off? And the answer is yes, they get the crit in the roll-off, but that's been an FAQ before. That's rolled into the rules now. So in the advanced reroll section. So that's cool. That's great to see. Anytime they come up with an FAQ, it's better for the game that it ends up rolling into a rule book later. And so that wasn't in the Weird Hollow rule book, but it is here. And I'm sure will be in the next season one. The last thing to call out on the rule book is one change I located. It's not a change to the way we play the game. That would be a little weird, right? To have Weird Hollow come out, set the stage, and then a starter set come out and change the stage, right? None of us want that. That would it'd be a horrible way to introduce somebody to the game. But the last starter set introduced the new card backs, and they moved the move or the general characteristics, general stats of that character, up to a different position on the card, give it a little different vibe to the way it was formatted on the card. Along those lines, they've decided to make a change where keywords such as hunter, brawler, zinch, petitioner, the rules or the keywords that don't mean anything unless referenced and interacted with, those keywords will now appear in bold italics instead of
interesting.
Yeah, instead of just straight bold. And I quickly was like, oh wait, does that mean that the Weird Hollow core box did that and I didn't notice? No, that's not the case. The zinch keyword on Ephelum is currently still, in that upright bold position instead of that italics bold position. But it does state, kind of that's a retroactive thing. And it calls it out. It says, hey, you might not see the italics in all cases across our Underworlds products, but going forward, you will.
Well, good catch. Brian, I think you mentioned earlier in the episode you had something you want to circle back to. Do you want to take care of that now?
Yeah, and everyone else can certainly jump in on, but Eric had mentioned that in the past, the collection aspect Previously, warbands were packaged with the warband models itself, the faction deck itself. Obviously, need those to play each warband, and then it also included universal cards. And what this meant was that whether I like ogres or not, I wanted and had to buy that ogre warband in order to get the universal cards, so that I could have all the universal cards available for championship in order to play and to the best of my abilities and have all the options for deck building. They have since changed that. Now individual warbands are sold without universal cards. So most recently, the Grisale's Arenae, which is a Daughters of Cain warband, was sold without any universals, as well as the Grincrax Loon Court, which is a Gloomspite Gitz warband. Neither of those have universal cards. So you don't have to purchase those if you don't want to play with those warbands. There's nothing universal about them that would require somebody who's not interested in them to purchase them to stay competitive. And in the grand scope of each season, we have 6-month seasons. So, and that might sound intimidating in the sense of like really fast paced. 40K does this. Age of Sigmar does this with the General's Handbooks, and 40K with the Chapter Approved books. Basically, what it means for Underworlds is that every 6 months you'll get a new rule book that has all the updates, all the FAQs, so that it keeps it current, keeps it fresh, and they stay on top of questions and rules. You also get FAQs periodically to supplement with that. And in the course of a 6-month season, you get a starter box, 2 warbands in that, with their faction decks, of course, and 2 universal decks. So you can just buy a core box. You have, if it's a faction that you want, play with one of those 2, and then you also have 2 universal decks out of that. Over the course of the season, there will be separate releases. 2 separate warbands. Once again, don't have to purchase those if you don't want to. And last season, we had 2 universal decks. So if you did want to stay competitive in the meta of championship, you would probably want to purchase both of those just so you had all the options out. But that's just 2 decks, not 2 decks plus 2 warbands plus the the core set. And that helps cut down the financial cost of the collection. And as we were talking earlier, I previously had a friend who said, like, why can't I buy the core box for a game and be competitive with it and win a tournament? Initially, I thought that's ridiculous. Every game wants you to buy in harder than that to stay competitive, to win a tournament. It's kind of ridiculous to expect a game to have the wide breadth of releases and still have the core box be competitive at the high levels. And then I went to Adepticon and I got 3rd place with Gnarl Spirit. Gnarl Spirit are an exception, but I did exactly what our friends had propositioned, which was using just the core set to place in an event. So Underworlds is at that place. And I think that's really interesting. And the seasons have become a lot more affordable. I thought in previous years, it was already one of the most affordable competitive games, and it's only gotten more so.
Yeah, I think with the highlight on Nemesis, but just having those different formats to give people an entryway. I'm going to close it out with Eric. If you have any thoughts you want to share as the guest of honor here, go for it.
I first of all just thank you guys for extending the invitation to come and join you to kind of play through this starter box, to experience it as a as a league runner, someone who loves bringing new people into community. It was very welcoming, and I did enjoy this box. And I think, if you don't already have these, like, it's not only great for 2 people who are interested in getting in it and they buy it as friends and they play it together and they experience it. That's cool. But it's also cool if you like to give demos and you want to have 2 warbands and 2 decks ready to go and not have to think too much about it. I think that can be a really good place to start, or have this in your back pocket.
Yes,
because I think you have to go through the process of building your own deck for your own, and then building one for somebody else, and then feeling like you have to balance it. That's a lot of work to put on an organizer to have those things ready. I'll say from my experience in Warcry, like when I play a war brand, I know how to clip its wings a little bit to play against somebody else, and that takes time. It takes time playing something to know how to like pull back or throttle, for other players. Sometimes when you're new at doing demos, or you're just starting out to try grow community, it can be an accidental, crushing that you give somebody, and that's a feel bad, right? So having maybe like a safe couple of decks to kind of introduce somebody in, that's a really great thing for GW to create for the community. I did mention like the FOMO, the buy, kind of feeling like you needed to pick up every box, was a bit of a turnoff for me in early days and mid days, because I'm not that kind of collector. I want to buy what I'm interested in. I want to feel like I have a choice in what I pick up, but everything's sort of buried in these different purchases, paired with that idea of feeling like I had to know what all the cards are and every possible combination or what everybody else was doing in order to not feel caught off guard. I will say on that second point, having played more games of, Warcry in my meta, if I run up against somebody's really big killy thing and I'm caught off guard, I kind of can shrug it off, and I know I'm going to get more games with them, and I'm going to figure out ways to deal with them or not, but no, it's a known entity. I'm not the surprise or being caught off guard is sort of like the bad feeling and all of that. And I think that if you're playing with, within a group and in a meta where you have kind of, you can get to know, hey, Davey's got this warband and he's playing aggro, and I ran up against it, and now I know some of the things that really stuck out to me. I can plan for that next time. I'm going to go at it again. I can take another run at it. And that's a better feeling. And I think that gets better when you can play more games. If it's, if you're playing once a month or once every 6 months, maybe that's harder to get at. But I think that similar to playing in my meta with Warcry, you run up against unknowns, you let it, run off your back, and play again, go at it again. And I think you can do that with the champion meta and all of the cards. But I think as someone who's maybe not decided to be that into the game yet, or anybody who's getting in the game and doesn't catch the bug yet, having these be more the rivals deck be more casual play or more competitive light play, I think is really good. And I'm very encouraged by, I've heard you guys talking about it for, some episodes. And so to be able to experience that was really good. And I feel like I have a box of all the cards that I've ever bought, with all, sitting in a box buried somewhere. And it's always been like a little bit of a hobby weight, right? Like a little bit of like guilt if I have all this and I don't know what to do with it. I would say that's shed for me. And the idea of coming back and, showing up on a Thursday night for league night to play a deck, a rivals deck with my warband, feels like, feels more approachable, feels more like I can be in the group without, and that just came to me, like being the person who doesn't buy everything, feeling like you're in a different class, not from like a social class, but like you're how deep you're in. Like I feel like I can show up with a rivals deck and be just as like in the game as somebody else is, and I think that's important.
I agree, and so, I would love to see you out on Thursday nights.
I was about to say, we'll see you this Thursday.
Right.
I'll be expecting cappuccinos.
So,
oh, we set a high bar.
Brian, is that a mobile operation? The cappuccinos?
No. I'll have to talk to Noble Knight.
Yeah, with the format focus ramp of how much you want to interact with this game, looking like Rivals to Nemesis to Championship, I'm so thankful for that ramp, because every one of those segments showcases the game and is interesting and fun to experience at this stage, right? It wasn't always that way. And, our league, for example, welcomes all games across that spectrum. And we have a community of players that are just so excited to play Underworlds that they'll show up with all 3 decks ready to go.
I definitely make it a point to show up with all 3 formats holstered. I think this last time I came with 2 championship, 1 nemesis, and 1 rivals, just to have options.
I also want to point out, in terms of some fun narrative craziness, we always love a mad scientist build, and the Nemesis format, especially, I think, really lends itself to some mad scientist stuff, and we're going to have some fodder with that, with space zombies flavoring in with different war bands. It's going to be a wild time. And shout out, because you had mentioned, I love this idea, Rockgut Trolls warband for Warcry painted up as Space Jam Monstars.
Yeah,
that was brilliant.
Let me shout out Mike from our Warcry League, who likes putting together, he calls it jank, and finding fun meme themes that you can kind of really dig your teeth into. So yeah, hey Mike, thanks for inspiring and making people laugh.
Indeed.
All right,
we have a Mike, and his name is Ben.
We do.
That's confusing.
Shout out Ben.
I think what I'm hearing is that we want to get ourselves this set painted up and just on hand and off to the side, so that anytime we have a brand new player show up, whichever one of us is free, you can just be like, "Yep, come on over here. We got this. Let's do it."
Yeah,
that's actually an excellent idea
for those looky-loos that come sneak over.
Yeah, like we got something ready for you right here. To whatever degree you want to engage with it. So,
well, Eric,
first taste is always free.
One question I think our listeners are eager to hear the answer to is, you're a lapsed player. When GW is looking at this game, you were in it, and then you were out, right? Are you looking to play more Underworlds after this game?
Well, yes. It's a little more complicated than that, because I'm also a podcast host, league runner for a different system under the GW banner. But this certainly takes the pressure off to feel like I've got to jump back into collecting everything to be a part of the hobby. And that's definitely a low bar to say, hey, I can't make it out. I can't get to my game on a Tuesday because something's a conflict. Maybe I can come out on Thursday to play this game and know that I can jump in and plus, I mean, I've been jealous prior to us having our Warcry League. I was envious of your guys's healthy, safe space, good boundaries, positive energy kind of, stuff. And so, I know that it's a space I can jump into too. So yes, I would love to play some more games of Underworlds. For my Warcry League listening, I'm not abandoning you. It's okay. I won't leave you.
Weren't ever asking you to abandon them.
I know you didn't, but they're gonna have thoughts, and I just need to head that off. You're live on the record.
Well, and on the record, this is an exchange program. One of us are stuck. Sorry for the word choice. With the endeavor of moving over to the Warcry world and sampling that, trying that out.
Yeah. So this summer, when our starter box comes out, would love to have one or two or all of you to host for a game and come check it out, and we'll have a podcast. We'll share an episode on our side about your experience, and hope you all come and listen to that.
Excellent.
Happy to do so.
Will there be cappuccinos?
You've raised the bar. I have to meet the bar or exceed it. I'm wondering if I need to come in with Kona Ice or something like that for if you locals, Madison locals know Kona Ice. It's a different vibe for sure, but it's summertime, so.
Agreed.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe we'll get a tape measure in Skylar's hands yet.
Stop! Run! No. Okay. On that note, and this should be said
on the board to make you feel better.
Thank you. I will feel welcome what I'm about to say is throwing you under a bus, and it needs to be said because he's packing up these gorgeous miniatures. Again, photos will occur into basic Tupperware, and I look at him and I go, the way you're packaging and transporting these gorgeously converted and painted models kills me. And you know what he does? Looks me straight into the windows of my soul and shakes the Tupperware.
What?
And then drops it next to him.
Some men
the
just
floor.
want to watch the world burn.
Yeah. It's the shock and awe of it, psychological. Skylar and I messed with his brain at Adepticon playing Blood on the Watch on the Clock Tower. So I'm just continuing the mystique of it all.
I looked instead of at Eric because I needed to break that engagement, right? Staring into my soul as he does this. Looked over at Brian hosting this starter game, and I say either he's leaving or I am.
And I left right away. After a taco.
All right. Well, speaking of leaving, we need to leave this podcast.
All right.
So we would love to hear from you, as always. You can get us at WTHcast and whatthehexcast at gmail.com. Eric, if they want to talk to you about some Dogs of Warcry stuff, what's your contact information?
Come to our Discord, themortalrealms.com/Discord, and chat with us on our Warcry channel, on our Underworlds channel, our AOS channel. I'm not on Twitter that much anymore, so that's where you can find me. Come check us out.
That's our Discord.
Same. Hey, and if you do come in, engage in whatever way you want to, but it really makes our day if you mention like, hey, every time I see someone says, hey, we heard this podcast or that podcast, and we thought we'd come check it out. It's fun to make that connection.
Yeah, we're keeping score.
Yeah. Yep. Hash marks carved into the wall here. There is a lot more content on themortalrealms.com, more experiments happening all the time. We have our four main podcasts, Pat's a Story, Dogs of Warcry, The Mortal Realms, aka The Story Phase, and of course, this one that you already found and are listening to, What the Hex. You can find links to all our stuff there. Coming up, I think this podcast, it's been a while since we got to really cover some championship play, so I think we're going to cover that in some way, be it builds or a battle report or a live deck build. There's some options, and we're a little ways out, but we'll be coming at you likely with that, unless, like I said, a big shift in Underworld's news comes out that we have to address. Eric, you probably are aware of this. We do a flavor text quiz here. You're part of this. You're stuck in this now. So the way this works is I read off the flavor text from a card, and you try to guess what that card is.
So after me telling you that one of my fears is having to know all the other cards that everyone else has, you're going to put me in front on a test in front of
Tupperware shaker.
Lay it on me, Davey.
Play the game.
Everyone is welcome to answer here, but this one there is no attribution for this quote. It's the nameless narrator. Nagash denies the gift of eternal rest to those who defied his will.
Annihilation.
Good attempt there. This is a card that would have been in the starter set here, and for the other guys, it
Restless Dead.
It's Restless Dead.
Okay, good.
All right. Well, with that, your recommended listening for this episode is Learning. It's the title track off of Perfume's Genius album of the same name. It's not an artist that I've heard a bunch of, but it's always been in there something to check out. And then I found this one and quite enjoyed it. And that'll do it for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
And I've been Skylar.
I've been Brian.
And I've been Josh.
And I have been, and I will continue to be Eric.
Excellent. And one more, a guest, but one known to listeners of this network. Eric, how are you? Perhaps muted.
He is muted.
I'm a professional.
Yeah.
I'll give
Eric,
you a better.
Yeah. Eric, how are you? For what the heck? I've been Davey.
And I've been Skylar.
I've been Brian.
Josh?
And I've been muted.
There, we did it. I'm glad we bookended the accidental mutes there. That really holds the room together.
And as we began.